Hello again, and welcome to ManchTalk. I'm Tammy Simmons.
And I'm Carla Garrick.
Thank you for tuning in. I feel like we're being redundant because I feel like all I talk about lately is things that are on the ballot, but it is kind of
an election
important.
coming up. Remember, the 5th of September. No. October, November. Next month.
3 weeks from today.
That's crazy.
How does that happen? I was looking this morning, because this is what I do on Tuesday mornings. I look on things online. I was looking up, my original plan was I wanted to talk a bit about the School Charter Commission, which we can come back to. And I had gone out to the city clerk's website, which has got all sorts of handy information on it, and to find how many people we were electing to the School Charter Commission.
Isn't it? It's a lot, right?
Well, we're electing 9, so we'll come back.
But there are like 30-something people
What I did realize is we have 2 different ballots.
Oh,
and I was because I was like, wait a minute.
I want to look at that.
So the sample, if you go out to the city clerk's website, you can download your ward's sample ballot.
How did they figure out where the names go? Why am I like the last, second
It's alphabetical. We can come back to that.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's weird.
No, it's not.
Mm-hmm. HIJKL, all the way this way, starting with H, but why is Hamer?
And why is like...
Because he's a D. I don't know. Okay, we're getting distracted. Anyways, so I went out there and I realized when you go to vote 3 weeks from today on November 5th...
I'm not going to try that again.
You'll get 2 ballots. One has the normal municipal stuff. That's where you'll vote for Victoria Sullivan for mayor, and you'll vote for your alderman, and you'll vote for school committee members, and you'll vote for the ward level positions. That's on the front side. On the back side of that, there are 3 questions that you answered, which we talked about last week. The city clerk does have a little voter guide, kind of explaining what the questions are, which ones are binding, which ones aren't. So good for them.
Did we ascertain, because we talked about which ones were non-binding and binding?
They are, the only one that's not binding is the one that says it's non-binding.
Okay.
The one about the kids on the school committee. The second one about the sports book retail locations is binding.
Okay.
And I did read a little bit more about that. It does talk, there was a law passed this year that allows 10, because we, created a monopoly again, allows 10 of these sports book establishments across the state of New Hampshire.
So it's basically sports gambling.
It is. It's an establishment where you would be able to go and vote, or not vote, bet on a football game or things like, on sports.
I watched this documentary. I forget what it was on, which channel it was on, but it was really fascinating. It was about sports betting and the fact that these markets are being liberated, and it was set mostly in Vegas. Yeah. But I had no idea how nuanced this betting is now. Like, you can literally bet on what you think, if someone's like throwing the football to someone else, whether you think that guy is going to catch it or not.
Interesting.
It's insane.
Who knew, right? So reading a little bit about the law, there can be 10 locations or licenses or whatever we want to call it across New Hampshire. Nashua is interested. The state lottery commissioner, the gaming commissioner, or whatever it is.
I think Laconia has one in North Country.
Says there is distinct interest in Manchester. So apparently there are entities interested in Manchester. Part of the law, which you and I might not like this part, said before they can do this, even though we made these sports book, whatever the heck they're called, sports book locations legal, you still have to get permission from the local municipality, which in some ways I like, but it is kind of funny we're doing that backwards permission thing. Instead of Manchester saying we don't allow it, we have to get permission to allow it, which you shouldn't have to get permission to do things from your government that aren't illegal.
But isn't that like a home rule, not home rule issue?
Yeah. So the question will be on the ballot. If we say, yes, we will allow these, then a business could apply to the state for one of those 10 permission slips. So those are the questions.
And are they only going to give like one per city, or could all 10
I don't know.
be in Manchester?
I don't know.
Like, what are the rules for this special monopoly gambling that we've set up?
I didn't look that far.
Okay.
So who knows? But that's on there. So it was just interesting that the city clerk's office does have a voter guide to kind of help people with that.
Because if you think about it, right, when they introduced Keno, I mean, I know there are several establishments in Manchester, including Frickers, which is just down the road from me. And I thought it was really interesting, as if you notice that, I'm not saying, but there were a lot of winners. So this is managed by the Lottery Commission, right? So right when Keno was
they
introduced,
probably got all sorts of
there
winners.
were a lot of winners in
So
those
now you
first
wanna
like
play
4
more.
months.
Now you play all the time.
And now I don't really see
Yeah.
the winners anymore.
Maybe it's just a
it's
random
a coincidence, I'm sure.
Then on the second ballot, when you go 3 weeks from today, on November 5th to vote, will be something that has lists and lists of names. This is for school charter commission. Vote for no more than 9. So we are electing 9, and there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34. There's 37 names to choose from.
And the second to last one is Carla
Yes,
Garrett.
so
and
way over
everyone should
here
vote
on the
for me.
bottom, you want to vote for Carla Garrett. And right above her, you can vote for James Gaudet. He's a pretty good guy. He works with the taxpayers group. You were asking what order? In state law, there is a provision, because everybody always asks, how does so-and-so end up at the top of the ballot,
Right, because it starts with Hopwood.
Right, so what I don't understand here is...
I heard that they do it by sort of lottery.
There's a lottery. The Secretary of State does it for an entire cycle. And they pull a letter, and then it's alphabetically from there. So apparently, this is alphabetically from H, except for I don't know why Gary Hamer's down at the end, because I would think that you would be the end.
Oh, maybe they pulled Hopwood. Maybe they literally
No,
pull
it's
your
not.
name.
I don't believe it's by that candidate. It is literally set. All ballots across the entire state are determined like 2 years ago by the Secretary of State in there. So I don't know. But that's, if you look, they are alphabetical. They go from H all the way through the alphabet and around back to H. But it is interesting because the School Charter Commission, which Carla is running for, so you should all fill in the dot for Carla Garrett. I'm not really sure what the School Charter Commission is going to do. I think of myself as a fairly informed person when it comes to both RSAs about what the city can do because of the spending cap and what laws we had to change for that, and also about what's going on with municipal elections. Kinda. Except for this, I feel like I'm totally confused because...
because I got a thing from Manchester Inklink, and they were like, please complete this voter's guide, right? And as I was filling it out, I was kind of like, I don't know what... I'm not really sure what this is going to do, other than it seems like we are trying to create a separate
chart. Well, that's what I don't understand.
Authority,
well, that's what I believe. That's if I had to bet a beer on what I think the underlying agenda is. I think it is so that the schools...
Can we bet something I can drink?
Okay. Well, how about we'll bet some, I don't know. Some
lemonade.
A really, really good coffee from Republic. Okay? If I could bet a really, really good coffee from Republic on the underlying agenda, I would say it's to get out from underneath
the tax cap,
the control of the budget by the aldermen, perhaps the ethics things that lie in the current charter.
So the conflict of interest.
Right.
We do know that is a challenge here in Manchester, as a lot of the aldermen who serve actually vote on contracts where either they have family members or direct, people in their households who are
and now
beneficiaries of the largesse.
Well,
that
and
goes
if we
with
take
giving,
out some of
more and more of our taxpayer money,
if we take that ethics part out, right, of the school side of things, does that mean we can elect, spouses of teachers? And then, not have any guidelines. I really don't. I honestly, sincerely have no idea because
Which is why it would be good to get a good mix of people on that commission.
Right,
you don't just pick.
You can't just pick a bunch of education
people because that's probably
people.
Not going to work out well.
Maybe John Clayton's a Democrat, but
I like him. I've worked with John on issues.
Tim Baines is on this list. I would vote for Tim Baines. I think he's objective. I think he would look at this objectively, I think
because really what you want to do, right, you want to have a balance of people. When I was completing that thing for Manchester Inklink, I said, well, I think my strengths are, of course, I'm a former lawyer, so that helps. Get to say if we're going to be writing documents that are like legalese, I can certainly bring my expertise to that. But then, I can also balance it from the perspective of I'm a taxpayer, right. And I believe that more choice
is right.
Genuinely makes people happier, right? So, if you want to be happy, get a good mix in
better
there.
results, but I keep going back to, okay, so I printed out the city charter, because you can go on this Manchester city clerk's website and you can see the city charter. And this is basically just the rules. This is like the Constitution of Manchester on how we do things, who's responsible. I should
probably read that.
Well, that's what I figured.
I think I've read parts over the years.
It printed out on 25 pages.
Okay.
So it's not like some ridiculously long, bloated document. It talks about the board.
Probably be 24.
It probably could be 22. It talks about the powers and duties of the board of mayor and aldermen. It talks about, the powers and duties and veto power and appointments and stuff by the mayor. It talks about departments and department heads and appointed officers, like all the things. And then it gets down to schools and school committee. So I'm like, oh, okay. And it says under there, if you flip to that section, it's only not even one page.
Oh, wow.
And it talks about, where'd it go? School committee. See, now I lost my school committee. It is like down here, it's less than one page. The Manchester shall continue to constitute a single school district and except as otherwise provided in this charter, the board of mayor and aldermen and the school committee shall to continue to exercise such power in relation thereto as these respective bodies have under the law in effect at the time of the adoption of this charter.
I swear I will write it in more clear English.
Right, that's
folks.
really bad. The school committee shall be comprised of 14 members, one of each from 12 wards of the city, 2 at large. The school committee shall sit and act together as one body. The mayor shall be an ex officio member with all the powers and privileges of other committee members and shall be chairman of the committee.
So school committee different to school board? Or
no, we call it school board. It's the school
it's the
committee.
same thing.
The school committee shall nominate a candidate for superintendent of schools for election in accordance with state law. Candidate for superintendent of schools for election. That's weird because we don't elect the superintendent.
No.
And should a vacancy occur in the office of school committeeman, the board of aldermen shall fill vacancy until such election is held. That's all there is in the whole charter about the schools.
Okay. But then
then there's a law. Then the state passed a law this year that was put in by Pat Long, saying we're going to establish, the Manchester shall establish a charter commission to revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School District Charter, which I don't think we actually have.
That's not the Manchester
School
School
I don't
District
think
Charter,
so, right?
So we should see if we can get our hands on that.
I don't think they're...
But here's the thing, I read an interesting article this morning by Rich Girard, who of course is not running again, but he did serve on the school board for a long time.
And he used to be, he worked in the mayor's office for where he was work.
Right, and so, he talked about is it Manchester Proud, which is a sort of nonprofit group that is very interested in the education. I mean, I'd be curious, and in fact,
how many of these people have donated?
I'm gonna go research how many of these people are
either involved or have donated to.
Right. Well, you see, you can't know who.
Oh, that's right, because it's a nonprofit. So so
the interesting thing is with New Hampshire's 91A, I believe. There's case law that actually says if you are a quasi-governmental agency, i.e. if you're getting more than 50% of your money
from the government,
then you are actually subject to 91A laws and, to open, transparent government. So I think that certainly is an interesting tool that we maybe should start to
Of course, how do you
explore.
know if they get more than 50%?
Yeah,
if you can't see what they get.
There's a chicken and egg. But I think that with anything where, certainly I think it's Kathy Sullivan,
she's
former
the former chair of the Democratic Party.
She loves to look up, who's spending what and who's filed what and how many donations everyone's got. And she's a big proponent of transparency when it comes to the flow of money. So maybe Kathy could stand with us
and say, hey,
and be like, hey, like where who's funding what and where's this money coming from and what are the special interests?
So you're going to be asked to elect these 9 people that I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do, because it says the Charter Commission, this is in the law, the Charter Commission shall submit its recommendations for a procedure to revise, amend, or replace the Manchester School District Charter in the form of a ballot question to the I'm still not convinced that there's a school charter. So we're giving these 9 people this direction that they can put a ballot question on next year's election, which conveniently happens to be a presidential year, which if there's an underlying goal of, the Democrats have the advantage, that could just backfire
Well,
completely.
I want to go back to why I mentioned Rich Girard's blog post was because in that, he talked about, and he's leaving, so I think he's just trying to like data dump, right? He's like, here's what I learned over time,
here's
right?
things I've been noticing.
So I'm just really taking it as an information source. I really don't have any opinion. I'm just learning, right? And so he thinks that we had this push earlier in the year for a tax override, right? The aldermen did talk about, hey, should we put something on the ballot that can override the tax cap? And there was a big stink. There was a bit of a response from the taxpayers of Manchester, and so they decided to take it off. But apparently, the backstory to that is they took it off because they didn't want to bring out, and I quote, the wrong kind of voters, which would be people who care about the tax cap because they care about us living and exercising our rights within our means, right? So, I think this is a full run around the tax cap. And if you think this is not an issue that you should be concerned about, think again. We spend 60% of the money that's spent in the city. I mean, it's more than 50% of the money goes just to the schools. I mean, what are we spending on each student? Over $16,000, I believe now. So the question becomes, like, how? But we're not getting, as compared to 10 years ago, whatever. It's probably doubled since then. I don't even know, but I'll go look it up.
And we're just not seeing results. We're not. Well, and interesting. So I think I read this since we talked last. West High School. I was reading an article about they're trying this different type of education, and I'm all for there being a varied amount of educational options for kids, because not all kids learn the same and not all kids can excel the same, which is why I'm such a big proponent of school choice, because kids aren't round pegs that fit into the square hole, or however that works. That's just not how kids work. So West High School is doing some alternative type of thing where kids are more responsible for their schedules, and classes are twice as long and every other day. And I didn't really get into the nitty gritty of it. I just thought it was interesting that this is an interesting alternative, because there probably are kids that would benefit from this. But the problem is the kids that go to West High are still dictated by where they live, not by that is the best choice.
And the best choice meaning that your child might learn a certain way. Like when I was in high school back in Africa, like we didn't know things like some people are visual learners and some people are
Everybody
audible.
did the same thing.
We all did the same thing, and now we've learned over time that people learn differently. So why wouldn't we lean into the idea that we should create schools and create competition so that we can do the best for our
and that's
children?
what I thought. That's great that West High School is going to have this alternative, and West High has
and like at Goslar down but where I am, they did this great program based on Stephen Covey's, 7 Steps for Successful People, or whatever the old book is from the 90s, which was like a seminal work at the time. I remember reading it and being like, all right, you do these 7 things, you're going to succeed in life. And I implemented them as part of sort of my life, right? And I was like, oh, that's really cool. It's kind of like leadership stuff. And I spoke to someone who was on a school board in Nashua, and she was like, yeah, Carla, it's great, except if they can't read and write, it doesn't help that they're learning all this touchy-feely stuff. And I was like, you have a point.
And back to the assignment to school by your address. So let's say this new idea at West High School is great. I don't know that it is. It might be awful. And it might be better for kids who are self-motivated and are better do that. But what about the kid who happens to live on Varney Street, who needs a much more structured, much more traditional environment to learn in?
Tammy's going to send him to military school.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, that kid doesn't get a choice whether he wants to go to the program at West High School or over to Memorial, which might be more structured.
Right.
I don't get it. I think it's awful that school, especially middle school and high school, I think, are limited by your address.
I mean, so let's say this charter commission is something where we can, I hate to use the word radical because a lot of times that'll scare people, but let's just say let's change the status quo a little. Like maybe if there is this opportunity to get the right people in the room, and I believe I'm one of those right people, maybe we could just really shake things up. I mean, I would still say whatever it is needs to be subject to the tax cap.
Yes.
Like, we can't go nuts. Like, we can't do.
You can't just say, "Oh, and we're going to send you a new tax bill, and we're not going to follow the tax cap, and we're going to take out all the ethics and stuff."
Right.
What's interesting, I don't have kids, so I don't deal with this day in, day out like some parents do. I never really thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense to me anyways. One of the things that Victoria Sullivan talks about is the need for a district-wide curriculum. And I thought, well, I don't know. Well, why? Right? Because why? And then wherever I was reading it, maybe it was something that Victoria wrote, because if, this family lives over here on, Clinton Street, and their kids go to Parker Varney, and they're learning the curriculum there in second grade. And halfway through the year, they move from Clinton Street to the other side of the river, and now they're going to Jewett Street School. If they're using a completely different curriculum, that kid's like,
I'm like a Justin Dye, and I'm not,
No, I think,
sorry, but I mean, I don't know. I was in 6th primary school, so I'm like,
just saying, I think teaching techniques versus curriculum. Like, I think I lump them together. Like, I think there should be, this is what you're supposed to, we're teaching in second grade. This is the general,
but isn't that what these standardized tests are, right? Because now they're just teaching kids how to
test the test. I never had to take that many tests when I was a kid. I remember taking some tests. I don't think it had anything to do with, like, my scores. I think it was more of a, like, and they were standardized tests, but I mean, there was, like, I rarely remember them in grade school, maybe like 4th grade or 6th grade. I remember taking one series of them in 7th grade.
Are there in New Hampshire, or maybe even in America, and excuse my ignorance, so maybe people will be like, no, we definitely not putting her there. But I'm someone who's willing to say I don't know something and go find it out or ask the right people, which I think is how life should work, right? You can't know everything. But are there, like, remedial schools here? Like, are there, like, I know there are special ed classes and that kind of stuff, but do we have
I don't know. I know there's summer school, but I don't, but that's usually like specific course, because like you failed math, so you have to go to summer school.
Well, the reason I ask, right, is one of the criticism I have heard against school choice is people say, well, but you're not forced to take underperforming students, right, and scholars. And I'm like,
but they do.
But and they do, right. Because people learn differently. Right. And I've always thought, well, that's interesting, because is that, like, really a concern? I mean, I know special ed costs us a fortune, right? It's over $200,000
I don't know that we
actually.
I don't know that we actually spend more money on low performing kids, or have any plan for those low performing kids, other than because we push them on to the next grade, and then they perform low there.
I mean, it's, and this is the reason why I'm so passionate. When I still lived in New York, I taught at City College, right? Mm-hmm. And I was teaching freshman composition. And the kids
can't
who were in college couldn't, like, read and write properly. Like, they were writing at, I would say, like a 10-year-old level. And I'm like, look, if you're going into student debt to, like, go to school to get a degree in something that probably isn't going to be, it's like, what are we doing?
I remember you say that. I had a friend, a mutual friend, not your friend, I'm just saying a friend in our lives, who is a teacher now. And she could not write well at all. I mean, at all. And I remember thinking, you have a college degree first, and you're going to teach kids, and literally you struggle to write in the English language using,
I think I've said this
grammar
on this show before, but like I really struggled when I taught, because I was kind of like, I'm going to fail them all because they're not up to snuff. And I went to see my advisor, and he was like, you can't do that. And I was like, I don't know how to grade this. And he said, take the one that's the least bad, make that an A, and then grade on the curve.
That's not really how.
And I was like, how are we helping anyone with this?
We're
right?
just collecting
so now
money.
you're collecting money, but you're also pushing people out into the world that aren't fully equipped to do what they're supposed to do. So if we're spending all this money on kids, I don't think it's unreasonable to say they have to be able to read and write when they get out of school.
I mean, basic reading. You don't have to be able to read Shakespeare and. I mean, it'd be nice, don't get me wrong. No, but I'm saying, but you should be able to read this city charter and comprehend at least.
Well, not that first sentence you read.
Or at least read a sentence and know that doesn't work right. Those words that's not the right words.
What's this word salad that they're trying to.
Why is there an extra 2 in there? Because this doesn't make any sense. So you should be able to do that, and you should be able to balance your checkbook and do basic math. You don't have to be, you don't have to be a calculus major or anything, but. If you can't balance a checkbook, not that anybody has a checkbook, but if you can't balance your bank account, or you can't, to be honest.
So I swear, I read this the other day, and I don't think it was a joke. I think it was in all seriousness. Apparently, there are people who didn't realize that
when the checks are gone, that means the money's gone.
Yes.
I can't wrap my head around that. And they say that, I've heard that for years, but I read the same article that you read. They were talking about kids just not understanding.
So they get overdrawn at the bank because they were like, but I didn't know because I still had checks in my checkbook, so I assumed I still had money in my checking account.
Right? And I really am a big proponent, I think, in high school, and I think it should start much earlier than high school,
Oh, but
reading and writing. We should
teach people economics and
teach how the economy works, the basic economy and basic life skills. I mean, when I was in 800 years ago, when I was in junior high, and we took home ec, which only the girls could take. We learned how to sew and we learned how to cook and things like that. But now, and then they changed that and they made it more like life skills. But apparently they're not teaching life skills. Yes, I think all kids should learn basic cooking skills.
Oh, yeah.
I think all kids should learn.
I got kicked out of my cooking class. I was in an all-girls high school, but we had home ec. And, I was 2 years younger than my grade, so I think sometimes I'd just be, and I forget, we were making Welsh rabbit. And I don't know.
You were like,
I burned something, and they were like, Carla, we think you got to sit outside for a couple
learn
of years.
Basic banking procedure, basic banking.
Well, shouldn't you be learning things at school that are
basic
actually
contract,
helpful
basic contract, and
life?
understanding that a contract is binding? Because I don't think people know that when they rent an apartment and say, I'm going to give you $1,000 a month rent, that means you contracted for it.
But here's the thing, Tammy, is we kind of live in this world where people have very separated ideas about what is enforceable, right? So if you're saying the Constitution is a living document, then you're like, contracts aren't binding. Right. It's a problem. It's a slippery slope.
Wow. So we've succeeded at another Facebook Live, I think, anyways. Or not. Maybe that's just us looking at me on the camera. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or concerns, ManchTalk@gmail.com. Follow us on our Facebook page, ManchTalk. We have a Twitter feed, but Twitter's evil.
Yeah,
I'm not doing Twitter anymore.
I put the twit in Twitter.
I'm not good at it. But thank you for tuning in on Facebook if you did, and we will see you next week. Make sure you go to the farmer's market and enjoy the beautiful, beautiful foliage while it's still there.
The foliage is stunning this year.
That's all we got.
Peace out, guys.
Bye.